Coming up on show 390, it's a Saturday special. Hello, my name is Martyn Lee and welcome to EV News Daily. At the weekends, if we possibly can, I like to bring you interviews with people who are involved in and around the EV space. But today, it's a first. I can honestly say, hand on heart, this is the very first time that I've spoken to an adventurer. Plug-in Adventures was founded by Chris Ramsey, and maybe you've heard of Chris, maybe you've seen him online, known for tackling a 10,000-mile adventure in a Nissan Leaf back in 2017. And that adventure was shared online. It inspired many people to pay attention to EVs because media organisations, individuals, bloggers were all going, hang on, 10,000 miles in a Nissan Leaf. Well, over the last 7 years, Chris has been the pioneer of overland and endurance EV adventures, and these days, he is a very busy boy, as you'll hear on the interview now. He's travelled thousands of miles in the last few weeks, and this year is just going to get busier and busier as he talks to everybody from industry experts, community groups, schools, even car dealers, and educating them about EVs. So, let me bring you the interview. I caught up with Chris last weekend and to find out all about his life as an EV adventurer, as a presenter, as a spokesperson for the EV community. This is going to be in two parts. First of all, I've got the interview, which is 15-20 minutes long. I'll come back at the end of that and say a couple of words. And then he also did a talk on stage. Now, I was fortunate Chris gave me the permission to record that. That is at the, if you're looking at the time thinking, this is a long old podcast, that speech that he gave, that talk, is at the end. Now, I would obviously love you to listen to the very end because this is fascinating. He goes into a lot more detail that we didn't talk about in the interview. And so I would encourage you to listen to the very end. I would love you to enjoy all of what he has to say. The interview comes first, and then I'll put that. I'll just stick it on the end, and I won't come back at after that at the very end of the podcast. So, however you use today's show, thank you so much for downloading as always. And we'll start off with the interview with Chris. We're inside a car at the moment, and I was going to do it outside and have a wander around the car park, but it is blowing a gale today. So we're tucked inside the car with Chris. Chris Ramsey. Plug-in Adventures is what people would know you for online. What's the headline thing that most people would know you for then?
I would probably say people would know me more for the Mongolia Rally. That's where myself and the person who doesn't get too much of the credit, my wife, we drove from London to Mongolia and Siberia.
How far is that?
That was 8,500 miles in the end. We did that in a 30 kilowatt Nissan Leaf. It was pretty standard. We raised the suspension, we took out the back seats, put a roof rack on it, and that's it. And it took us 56 days. So we shared that on social media. We kind of just promoted to people that electric vehicles can go long distance. Charging infrastructure seems to be a big question for people, but hey, we drove through Kazakhstan and other countries with zero charging infrastructure. So that kind of got away from the charging infrastructure point of view. But yeah, I think people liked it. So that's what people will know me for.
Okay, so people listening now who hadn't heard of you until now, they're instantly Googling you to have a look. But briefly, the motivation for doing that in a Leaf, where did it come from?
I think it all stems back in 2012 when I did my first. I was like a lot of people sitting there kind of going, what are these electric cars about? How far can they go? Where do you charge? And I came across a Leaf and I decided to jump in that car and go for a long distance road trip, long weekend. And I drove from Aberdeen to London to Cardiff to Edinburgh and back up to Aberdeen. Long weekend, 50 charges in the entire country, and loved it. And ever since then I thought, right, I love adventures. I love these electric cars. And I've always had the Mongolia Rally. I've always known about it because that's been running 12 years. But for 6 years, I was like, I want to do this. And that was really when I decided to do it, because it then did the whole charging infrastructure scenario. It said to people, you can go long distance. Yes, you're not going to do what I did, but you don't necessarily need the charging infrastructure because you go home to your charging station every single night. And it just nailed all those myths in one go.
Brilliant. And then since then, your life obviously took a different turn because you were then known for this incredible adventure, and then that's taken you on a journey, your own adventure that you would never have predicted, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, to get used to what's happened since we've done the Mongolia Rally, it's just crazy, it's mind-blowing. And I mean, I'm here today at Ace Cafe supporting Craig from EVs in the Park, because it's just great that these kind of events kick up, and it's great for public engagement. And to use the profile that I have, I'm not going to say I'm some big massive celebrity, but I mean, it's to use the little profile that I have to bring more people to events like this is just, it's a mind-blowing feeling.
And you end up talking both to people that this is a group of people that we are lots of EV fans and a few EV curious people here today, but you also end up talking to people who aren't at that stage yet, who are coming to this and going, electric cars, they're milk floats, right? And then trying to smile and not punch them in the face in the nicest possible way and be like, oh my goodness. So you must have different levels of, like, you come to an event here and the way that you talk to, you know, a group of enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, what's it like when you go and talk to a group of people that are like, an electric car? How could that possibly be?
I was talking to some of the guys here, and I'm like one of those the only electric guy in the village kind of thing. In my street, I'm the only guy with an electric car. I'm the only guy with solar panels, and I spend half my time going out, and the neighbours will say, well, with these solar panels, how do they work then? Well, produce energy from the sun, and then, you know, it's charging my electric car. And they're like, charges your electric car? I didn't know that could do that. So your electric car's getting power from the, like, and so you have these conversations constantly. But it's great because I think a lot more of the public are now getting curious about it, and we've seen obviously that the increase, the spike in electric car sales, and obviously second-hand values are now going up because of it. And I think the public are getting a lot more curious now about electric and kind of getting switched on to there are benefits to it. And I always say to people, let's face it, people want to see the benefit in their back pocket. And then the fact of the renewable energy angle and the zero emissions angle becomes a side element of that. But yeah, I think it's encouraging to see what's happening in the market just now, and the public, the amount of public that are becoming more electric vehicle aware.
Do you talk to kind of companies and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what I'm spending a lot of my time doing. So this year is going to be a lot more focused on going into companies, talking about electric vehicles, trying to get the businesses themselves to install chargers, get the staff to cross over to electric vehicles, and then also going out to schools, universities, and we're hopefully going to be doing a talk this year where we'll tour a number of cities talking about how I got into electric vehicles, why I got into them, the adventures, yes, we've done, but also about all the different technology that's available. And that'll just be like an evening show.
And so you mentioned that your mileage is just off the chart. Something like you changed cars. We're sitting in a car that you've had a couple of months, and you've done how many miles?
So I've had this car about 6-7 weeks, and I've done just shy of 11,000 miles. So I mean that kind of, when you said the point about, you know, your life has changed, it definitely has. I mean I'm traveling all around the country just doing events and engaging with people, but 11,000 miles in 6-7 weeks. I've never dreamed I'd be doing that much, but I love it. I'm never more happy than when I'm sitting in the car driving. And
does your wife come on the adventures, or is she happy to, you know, let you go? And
no, I mean, she didn't come down today because literally we're finishing here at 4 o'clock, and I'm turning around and driving 500 miles straight back to Aberdeen, so like right through the night. So but my wife came on the Mongolia Rally, and I always people find it quite funny because her idea of the biggest nightmare is long distance driving. She hates it, but she came 8,500 miles across the other side of the country with me, across the world, sorry, with me.
Wow, that is fascinating. Over the next couple of years, there's going to be an explosion of new models. So I'm looking out of the car at the moment, and I can see obviously the usual selection of Teslas that people bring along, and Zoes at the other end of the scale. My white one's over there, little 22 kilowatt hour, which is, you know, £5,900 for a 2-year-old car, which is the story I tell everybody. Yes. And they can't, okay, so it's battery lease, yes, but it's £50 a month. So, and then everything in between, lots of Leafs and a few newer ones and Konas and stuff. So do you get to spend time in lots of different cars, or are you just too busy driving this one to go to places?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment I'm quite busy driving this one, but and I'm not gonna, it's not, I mean, it is a Tesla, so it's not a bad place to be, but I do get a chance to kind of get into some of the new electric cars, and there's a couple of quite new ones coming out, which I'm hoping to get into quite soon. Obviously, we got the new Leaf, the 60 kilowatt. You've got a couple of cars at the Aston Martin. It's just, I know it's a different kettle of fish, but the Aston Martin, the Porsche Taycan is coming out this year. I just think it's really exciting because yes, you've got Teslas, as you say, but the range of cars that are coming out this year to complement the market is just phenomenal.
in your previous life, before you became an ambassador for talking about electric cars and travelling all over Europe to talk about them, what did you do?
I worked. It's quite a small industry. I don't know if anybody will ever heard of it, but we'll say it anyway. But I mean, I used to work in the oil and gas industry.
Oh, I've heard of it. I think.
So I grew up in Aberdeen, the oil and gas capital of Europe. So you worked in the oil and gas industry, and that's really how I got involved in electric and kind of interested in it, because the company I worked for had a renewable energy arm. And they manufacture solar panels and turbines. I started researching a bit more, and I saw there was electric cars. I found the Leaf, and that's when I went off and did my first trip. And ever since then, back in 2012, that's it. I changed to electric, and I've never driven a petrol since.
It is interesting, isn't it? The oil. I've only been to Aberdeen once, but beautiful, absolutely beautiful place. Everybody should at least go once.
That's your opinion.
And you've left now. And as a visitor, I thought it was an absolutely wonderful place, and had some fantastic few days there. But yes, everything is geared around the fossil industry, but equally. So is, every other car has a personalised number plate, and there's helicopters flying everywhere. And my sense, this is 10 years ago I was there, my sense of, there's lots of money in this industry. How is it affecting places like where you come from? Surely there's got to be an impact on that industry.
Yeah, massively. I mean, obviously we've just been through the oil and gas downturn, which is still in. Aberdeen is starting to recover now, but I mean, there was over 70,000 jobs within the space of about 6 months lost in that industry. Aberdeen was not necessarily a ghost town, but it lost about 50,000 people off its population just because of the downturn. And that's because a lot of contractors work in Aberdeen and go home at the weekends. But Aberdeen has started to shift. So the council are running quite a big electric fleet. They're doing an energy mix. They're running hydrogen buses. They've got the biggest European hydrogen bus fleet. They also have a bunch of Toyota Miras. They're building a hydrogen refueling station, which will be powered by wind and solar. And we also have the famous Trump golf course. With the Trump wind farm. It's not his wind farm, but we all call it his Trump wind farm because we know he loved it so much. And that has 12 of the largest turbines installed in the world at the moment, just off the coast of Aberdeen. So Aberdeen is changing. It's going to take a while to get that transition because people are still heavily on oil, and that's where a lot of the money comes from in that city. But we will transition away, and I hope for the city that we will transition away quite swiftly.
I joked at the beginning of this interview that it was blowing a gale here, but actually on the sort of semi-serious side of that, yesterday in the UK, between 35 and 36%, I think it was a new record, around 16 gigawatt hours of energy or something like that, or 16 gigawatts. Energy experts would know more than I am, but I saw the headlines. It was a record for wind production in the UK yesterday. And the thing that when I remind, this seems so obvious, and probably to you and to everyone listening, that when you remind them, as energy gets greener, so do your miles. And they go, it's like a light. Oh, so if I charge my car when it's green, I'm less polluting. It's great to see those records being broken. More coal-fired power stations closing down all the time. It's a really interesting time.
It really is. I mean, Scotland's a bit of ahead. Promote Scotland, obviously, but we're way ahead of the curve. But no, I mean, we shut down our last coal power station a number of years ago. Over 50% of our energy comes directly from renewable sources. I was actually at a nuclear power plant, and they were saying that a lot of their energy, yes, is produced from nuclear, but most of Scotland's energy can actually come from the wind and solar installations within the country. Yeah. The nuclear there is there to kind of balance the grid. But that nuclear power plant is going to be closing down, and there's going to be more wind farms getting set up. So Scotland is really going to try and become 100% renewable. It's incredible, and we just need England to catch up, which I think they are. As much as ecotricity get a bit of a bashing at the moment, they're doing some great work with obviously trying to offset. They've obviously got their solar and their wind farms, and they're offsetting pretty much every mile that we cover. They're offsetting all that energy with renewable energy. So
it's just brilliant. Looking forward to this year and next year. Are you doing stuff under the Plug-in Adventures name? Is that what you? Yeah. Yes.
I mean, Plug-in Adventures is effectively the name. We hopefully will expand that team as we go. It's Plug-in Adventures is not just me. As I said, my wife is quite a big part of it and does a lot of work behind the scenes. And we were hopefully, yes, we will do more more adventures.
What's next? Is there something on the cards? Or you're not ready to share that yet?
I've kind of always I've the adventure network kind of community is very, very close, and a lot of people kind of reach out and they talk really well. And one of the guys have said to me, whenever people ask you that, I normally just say, oh, there's nothing really on the cards, I'm focusing on stuff back home. So there's nothing really on the cards, I'm focusing on stuff back home.
But there is something. Yeah. There is something. We just can't get it today, but we will get it. Brilliant. Okay. Wow, that's interesting. If people want to find out more about you, what you do, your talks, if companies are listening thinking, oh, it'd be interesting to get you to come in and talk to a group or do a breakfast or something, how do people find out more about you?
I mean, if they can either connect through us through social media. It's at Plug-in Adventure on all the social media platforms. The email address is info@pluginadventure.com. But that's literally what really, to be honest with you, what this year is all about. This year is getting out into the community, into the businesses, and into events, schools, universities, and just giving talks and educating people as much about electric cars as possible. Because the car dealers, as much as they're great, they're selling the cars, they are probably one of the most undereducated. So it's seeing if we can engage, firstly in Scotland, with a lot of the car dealers. And see if we can educate them a bit more. So
you're having to take on that, because you think it would be the job of the automakers educating their franchise holders. Some of them are retail and some of them are franchise, independent franchise. I mean, I tell the story, and I never really say the dealer that I bought it from because it's irrelevant. When we bought the Zoe, we had signed the paperwork. I had given him all of my money, and then he sort of looks up. If he had glasses, he'd be looking over the top of them. But he went, "How are you charging it?" And I'm like. Like, you are talking to someone who, I live and breathe EVs, and so I could have given the answer, well, on the 3-pin plug until the new Zappy charges out, and I'm waiting until. But I thought that's the long answer that no one. So I was like, I've got it covered. He was like, oh, okay. He only wanted to make the sale. Yeah. He was pleasant. He was personable. He was genuinely interested in selling us an EV because it was sitting on the lot, and therefore he had to get rid of it. He wasn't dismissive of them, but in no way did he go through. Your mileage will go down in the winter. Yeah. Your mileage will change depending on how you drive it, and how are you going to charge it? Because this is going to be a lifestyle shift for the better, and for the worse in some way. But it's going to be none of that conversation was had. It was the typical, because we took it for. I mean, we knew what we wanted, and it's a 2-year-old Zoe. What's going to go wrong? It's still got warranty, but we still went on a test drive because my wife wanted the test drive, and so. She wanted the test drive. She wanted the, she goes, if we're going to buy a car from a dealer, and because normally we would buy it from either, I've bought cars from the auctions before, but actually if you're in the UK, and you should definitely look up eco cars, and they can, because auctions have kind of changed over the years. Now the fees for individuals, it's like crazy nuts. So you're better off using someone who is like, someone like Eco Cars, and they are, or ecocars.net, I should say, and they have, they do so much business, they've got the lower fees, they can sort you out the car from wherever it is. And so, but we said, let's do it from a dealer. We'll just do that, we'll pay a little more. But on the test drive, the guy was still, it was like, oh yeah, the radio's really good in this. And it was like typical test drive. And it was like, tell me about regen or anything like that. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably plenty of your listeners that are out there. They've got stories kind of shouting now, going, "Yeah, I was at a charger, and this guy bought a car. I didn't even know how to plug it in, and he was plugging into AC rather than DC." And I mean, there's so many stories about that. And I've been into a number of dealers, and I tend to find if the dealer principal is not engaged at all, then the staff are not, because the dealer principal drives that down. I mean, I have been into, again, I won't mention the dealer name, but I've been into a Jaguar dealership in the UK, and the dealer principal actually went and bought an I-Pace. And I spoke to him, and he says, if I'm going to get my staff to sell these, because this is where the car industry is going, I need to understand it. I need to understand it first, and understand how it works, all the quirks, how to live with it, that I can tell my staff. And then they can tell people that, and I can get them out, rather than going home in their lovely big XJs that they take away, on the night. Says, I'll get them going out in the demo I-Paces, get them driving home in those, and then they can learn about the cars more. And that's what we need. But that shift is going to take a long time with dealers, because everybody's just heavily selling the diesel and petrol. But I don't want to waffle on, but coming from the oil and gas industry and the supply chain side, it's like saying to people, there's so much money invested still in the supply chain for petrol and diesel cars.
Of course, yeah.
So all the manufacturers have got all those spares, all those parts out there, high inventory, but also their suppliers. If they decided to just stop selling petrol cars tomorrow and sell electric, then all that supply chain that supported them, that have got livelihoods, they're going to go out of business. So the manufacturers obviously need to do a lot of work to invest in their supply chains, their suppliers, train their staff, look at how they can supply new components for electric car market and keep those good suppliers going. So that's for me another reason why it's going to take a number more years before we actually go to a purely electric market.
Fascinating stuff. All right, go and search socials for Plug-in Adventures. Go and see what Chris and his wife have been doing and will be doing this year. You're not going to tell us what you're doing next, are you? No, you're still taking tight-lipped on your next adventure. Damn it!
There's nothing really kind of planned at the moment. We just concentrating on the UK.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure. So that's the first part of the interview today on your Saturday special. That was the chat I had with Chris about what he's been doing and also what he'll be doing this year. Not that he'll give up too many secrets, but I know he's planning something. So in a moment, I want to bring you the chat that he had on stage, the talk that he gave. Before I do, just a usual sign-off. Thank you so much for downloading the podcast. There are loads of them in the archive. Normally we do news during the week. I try and bring you, along with the question of the week on a Sunday, if I can bring you as many interviews as possible on Saturdays, I do, and there's loads of those in the archive. You can search for those in your favourite podcast app. I put the audio on YouTube as well. There are 389 previous shows online for free. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. I like to thank them on a Saturday. There are 183 patrons of the podcast whose generosity means we get to make this. Thank you to Phil Roberts of Electric Future, EF.Energy here in the UK, big commercial solar projects. Also, Paul and the team at electricmotoring.net. He is our premium partner in the US, in Chicago, hiring out his Teslas there. He's got one of every model, and you can enjoy that. And to Brad as well. Now, Brad Crosby supports the show just because he wants to. He's not any other reason that he wants to support the message that we have and the cause. Thank you to David Allen, a early partner of the show, OEM Audio of New Zealand and evpower.co.nz, Sasha Pallenberg, and John, who is Beardy McBeardface on the socials, and to all of our exec producers, Alan Robson at Scottish EV Owner on Twitter, Alexander Frank, who is running his Alex's Universe YouTube channel, and has got some brilliant videos, new ones this week as well to check out. Hello to Harold Gear Skulsveen, Ashley Hill, Bjard Fuchstak, Bob Muir from gingercomputers.com in Dundee, Borislav Borisov, Brent Kingsford, Brian Thompson, Brian Weatherall, Brian Young, who is the presenter of a podcast called ConfT.show, if you're into your computer networking, Cesar Trujillo, Chris Benson, Chris Hopkins, Craig Coles, hello to Craig Rogers, Damien Davis, Darren Bird, Darren Sant, Dave Jewson, good to meet Dave recently, David Finch, David Partington, another person, I met so many people last weekend who support the show, David Prescott, Dirk Rutsatz, Don McAllister from screencastsonline.com, Frederick Rovick, George Clargo, Jack Oakley, Jason Fan, Jeff Urbies, Jerry Allison, John Bailey, John Nodell, John Timmis, Juan Gonzalez, Ken Morris, Kevin Mayerson, Last Allerger, Lawrence D. Allen, Louis Hopkin, Luke Cully, Marcel Lohman, Marcel Ward, Martin Croft, Matt Piscion, Matthew Ellis, Matthew Gruby, Maz Shah, Michael Pastrone, Mike Rogers, Neil E. Roberts from Sussex EVs, Paul Seeger-Smith, Paul Stevenson, Pete Glass, Philippe Calvé, Renee Schneider, Rod James, Rupert Mitchell, Sarah McCann, Scott Callahan, Seiki Payne, Stuart Hanna, The Limousine Line in Sydney, Walter McVeigh and Zach Hurst. Hello to Raj as well. Now, Raj Badwell has been one of our exec producers for a long time now. He knocked his support down from $10 to $5. By the way, you are always welcome, by the way. Up, down, stop, pause, start again, whatever you need to do. I appreciate anyone's support, whatever that is. Raj, thank you so much for your support as we build this show. If you want to catch up with me on the socials, you can do by searching EV News Daily. Question of the week will be answered tomorrow, by the way. I'm away with family this weekend, so if the usual schedule is not happening exactly as it normally would, then bear with me. Now, here is the second part of today's Saturday special with Chris, and this is the talk that he gave to the assembled group of EV drivers drivers at an EV meetup had been organised by Craig from the Renault Zoe Owners Club here in the UK. So thank you to Craig for organising it and Chris for doing the talk, and also Chris for letting me record the talk as well. Here you go. I think you'll learn a lot. I think you'll enjoy this. Really entertaining, incredible stories. Well worth listening to the end on this one. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.
I started Plug-in Adventures in 2012. It was literally a hobby and a bit of fun. Not a lot of people know that I work, or used to work, for an oil and gas company. And yeah, so I used to make all those big shiny tools that go down and pull. That pull all the oil from the ground. And then I discovered electric vehicles because the company ran solar panels, wind turbines as part of another part of their business. So I got into electric cars, found the Nissan Leaf, and then I decided that I was going to go out and test the Leaf and see what it was all about, charging infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. And I decided to drive from Aberdeen to London, London to Cardiff, Cardiff to Edinburgh over a long weekend. And there was about, 50 charge points in the country at that time. So I spent most of my time charging in Asda's front entrance, in petrol stations, out of hotel windows. I'm going to break this bike. And finished the trip, loved it, and basically bought a Nissan Leaf after that. And that was since 2014. I have never driven or bought a petrol car ever again. Now, it's not for everybody, I understand that, but at that point for me, I was hooked and I knew that this was the future. So from there on, with Plug-in Adventures, I decided to do a lot more trips. And one of them, which some people do know about in this room, a friend of mine got in contact and said, I want to do a road trip. I wanted to promote my business and I want to go to Formula E. It's like, great. He said, will you come with me? I was like, yes, but if we do it my way. He's like, what's that? I was like, well, I've always wanted to drive around the Monte Carlo race circuit. So we're going to drive from Edinburgh. You agree? We're going to drive from Edinburgh to Monte Carlo, and we're going to drive from Monte Carlo back to London in under 60 hours in a first generation Nissan Leaf. Sorry, a first generation BMW i3. So that was a 60-mile range, and we were charging every 60 miles. And we did that in under 60 hours, and he said he's never going to go in a car with me ever again. So I was building up. So all through those years, I always knew about the Mongolia Rally. Now, for people that don't know what the Mongolia Rally is, it's been going 12 years. It's unsupported adventure from London to Siberia. It's called the Mongolia Rally because it used to finish in Ulaanbaatar, the capital city of Mongolia. But they moved the start line, so the finishing line, to Ulan-Ude in Siberia, and that was just because the Mongolian government were getting quite wise to it and charging lots of people big visa costs and import costs for their cars. So they moved the finishing line, and a petrol car, it's always been petrol cars. No electric cars ever entered the rally. Nobody's ever attempted it, and so I just decided, look, 6 years down the line, cars can do this, I'm going to go do it. And I plucked up the courage to ask my wife if I can take pretty much a year off work to plan it all, get it all organised, and then go and do the Mongolia Rally. Now, my wife, her biggest idea of a nightmare is long distance driving. She agreed to it and she came on the rally with me as my co-driver. And we're still married, which is quite a miracle. And from that perspective, we looked at it and we thought, right, what can we do? Where can we go? You know, what's the vehicle to use? And what we thought about was, what can people buy today? And Nissan Leaf was probably the biggest car, and it's what I had the most knowledge of driving and the most experience with, having a 24 kilowatt Leaf. So we bought a 30 kilowatt Leaf. We stripped out the back seats. We raised the suspension of it slightly, and we put a roof rack on it. And that's all we did to it. We didn't extend the battery range, didn't take diesel generators with us as backup for charging the car, which some people thought we were going to do. And that's all we did. To plan the route, so if you think driving from London all the way to Siberia obviously has its challenges, but in Europe we've got a massive charging infrastructure. There's rapid chargers, so we can stop and we can charge within 30 minutes. But after Bulgaria, there was no charging infrastructure at all. So we had to rely on 2-pin plugs, equivalent obviously a 3-pin. So we were 10, 12 hours charging every time we stopped. So to plan that, because there's no charging infrastructure, how do you plan it? So I literally spent about 3-4 weeks of my life searching on Google Maps every 80 to 90 miles, a town, a village, a petrol station, a restaurant, a cafe, whatever, and I mapped it on a spreadsheet and we went off. So we set off in June And when we set off from London, we're all full of joys. We left and we were thinking, this is going to be great fun. We're going on this massive adventure. Now, for everybody here that drives, you guys driving electric cars, what do you see when you drive long distance? You basically see motorways for hundreds of miles and petrol stations, and that's it. That's what we saw for the whole of Europe. So this wonderful adventure that everybody thought, you must have had an amazing time. Social media looked amazing, but in reality, we were basically driving on motorways, hitting service stations and sleeping in the car in petrol station forecourts. That was our life for about 2,000 miles. My wife still loved me. But then the only time we really found the change was in Romania. So there's a highway called the Transfar-Garrison Highway. I'd completely forgot about this. Top Gear, they say it's the best driving road in the world. So it's about a 1,600 meter climb up into the mountains. And I saw this and I was like, all the other teams are going, I'm going. Now, from the start of the bottom of the mountain to a charger, there was a 120 mile stretch. My car could realistically do about 80 to 90 miles because of the modifications. And I put a 1,600 meter climb in front of me as well. So I said to the wife, we're off, we're gonna do this. And she just looked and went, you're mad, you're crazy. So we set off. We got to the top of the mountain with 49% battery. We still had about 60 to 70 miles left to go, but we had to go downhill. So obviously you guys all know, in this room, regenerative braking system, when I got down to the bottom of the mountain, I had just over 70% charge left in the car. It was great. So then we made it onto our next charger and we charged there, and then we headed off for Turkey. So Turkey is where we had our biggest challenge. So if you think we're driving into all these new countries, Turkey, there's all these horror stories about Turkey, about the coup that was going on at the time. All our family were worried that we're going to go into Turkey and we're going to get kidnapped or mugged or something like this. But we got into Turkey and thinking, right, what do we do now? So we need to charge. There is no charging infrastructure. Where do we go? So we headed and we pulled up at a petrol station, trying to find some accommodation for the night, and we thought we'll stay in a hostel. And we got chatting to a guy at the petrol station, and the guy's like, it's electric, so what do you do? Where's the petrol? It's petrol engine, plug-in hybrid. It was like, no, it's purely an electric car, so we need to charge. And so I need a charge right now, and we're just finding somewhere to stay. And he's like, come with me. So he took us back into a little cupboard, and it's where they had their storeroom with all their food, and he pointed to a plug. And he says, pull your car up and plug in here. So that was our first experience in Turkey, and that just made us calm down, relax, because we really were unsure about how it was going to go. And at that point, we then sat in the cafe at the petrol station. The guy was taking food off the shelves, opening them up, putting it in front of us, giving us coffee, and then the local police turned up, and we sat around a table for about 3 hours just chatting with the local Turkish police about electric cars and where we're going and how stupid we were. And that became a running theme. So as we traveled through Turkey, we literally just stopped at anything. When we go about 60 to 65 miles and say, right, if we find a services, if we find a restaurant, a cafe or a village, we stop. And we just ask people if we can charge. And we were literally just going and knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, can we plug in? And we never got stopped once in Turkey. Everybody just opened up their doors. There was one guy we went to a Renault garage, and he just, when we pulled up, he's like, yeah, plug in. And he says, right, you stay in a hotel? I was like, no, we're just gonna plug in here. For about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, we'll unplug and we'll leave. So can we plug in outside? And his answer was no. And he was very stern and very aggressive, and we were thinking, we're gonna get moved on. Let's get ready to go. He came off the phone and said, my wife is coming down now in her car. She's gonna get your luggage. She's taking you back to our house. You're gonna stay with us tonight. We're gonna feed you. We're gonna take you and show you our village. And we're gonna have a good time. And then your car will charge. In the morning you leave. And that was just incredible. How many of us, and we thought about this ourselves, we would never do that here in this country. And I think if we're honest, a lot of people in this room would probably not do it either. But obviously for us now that's changed. And that's one of the things we learned on this trip, is to be a bit more selfless with people. But Turkey, as we traveled through Turkey, we went into Georgia and Azerbaijan. Similar story, we were just charging and stopping at petrol stations, car dealerships, anywhere that just would give us a charge. And then we arrived in Azerbaijan. And we arrived in the port town of Baku, and this is where you take the ferry from Baku into Kazakhstan. Now, this was actually our anniversary. This was coming up to our anniversary time for me and the wife, and I promised her an extra special surprise for our anniversary. And I said, we're going to go on a cruise from Baku to Kazakhstan. What she didn't know was this cruise was on a tanker that probably looked like it sunk about 25 years ago and just dredged up from the water, put back on. It was just horrible. It was the worst experience. It was about 45 degrees. There was no AC, no air conditioning in the lower decks where your accommodation was, so it was increasing 50 plus degrees. It was horrible. We were sweating all the time. It was disgusting. So she didn't like her anniversary experience, but I can always get better now. There's no anniversary experience that can go against that, so it's cool. So when we hit Kazakhstan, this is the only country where we decided that we need to do a bit of planning. So Kazakhstan has obviously a massive resources for oil and gas and a lot of minerals. So we got in contact with a couple of contacts in Kazakhstan through the UK government, and they reached out to the state oil company and KazMoney Gas. And these guys had a little conversation with us. We had a few conference calls, and they said, hang on a minute, this is the future of our business. So okay, what we're going to do is we're going to install charge points in every single petrol station along your route, which equated to a 2-pin plug, but we would take anything at this point. And they did that all the way along through Kazakhstan. And so when we arrived, we got into the town, we plugged in, we got a charge, we got some much needed sleep. And we thought, right, this is great. Kazakhstan, we're going to be able to charge, we're going to pass through this country, really, really comfortably. But to put it in perspective, Kazakhstan is the size of Europe again. On the west side of Kazakhstan, going into the north, there virtually is no roads. So the only roads in all of the west side are carved out during the rainy season and some of the summer by trucks. And so you've got divots in the road like this, and you're having to ride on the ridges of these mud-driven divots to basically pass through a lot of the roads and a lot of the towns. It was a big challenge for the Leaf. There was a point on this trip where we were told, when you get to the end of this road, you can turn right. If you turn right, your car will be destroyed. Nobody takes that road. It's about 200 kilometers. It's really bad. Nobody goes on that road except trucks. Don't go that way. Go left, you will take a 500 kilometer detour to the town you're going to. I was like, no, I'm going right. I came here for an adventure, I'm going right. But if you're gonna do it, the cars can do it. And when we got to Astana, we got invited by the UN to meet with them. We got invited by the CEO of KazMoney Gas to meet with them. We had a number of these conversations and explaining the whole ethos about electric cars and the transition away from oil and gas. And I got a message about 3 weeks ago, and there's now a whole bunch of charging infrastructure being installed in Kazakhstan. So it was pretty cool. Their petrol stations are all ramping up. They're putting rapid chargers in, they're putting fast chargers. There's fast chargers going into some of the small remote towns. And KazMoney Gas are looking at installing fast chargers in all their petrol stations. So for me, it's mission accomplished on the Mongolia Rally. It's cool. But after crossing through Kazakhstan, so we crossed what? We were looking at about 6,500 miles at this point. Now, our life was drive for about 60 miles, charge. We'd charge for about 4 hours, and then we'd get on, crack on, and drive again for another 60 miles. And then we'd find somewhere to stop, and we'd sleep for the night. So our car would charge for about 14 hours overnight, and we'd sleep. But when we were trying to sleep at petrol stations and in public areas, the amount of times you're falling asleep, and you're like this, up against the window, car window, and you just get this little sixth sense that there's something not right. And you open your eye and you look, and you get this utter shock because there's a face pressed up against the window at you, looking at you going. And so it scared the life out of me. I couldn't sleep because I spent most of the time like flinching from knowing there's people there, but people would just bang on the car and at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and ask you what this is and why you're plugged into this plug. So I'd spend so many hours explaining to people about electric cars, which was wonderful, but it meant I was doing 35, 36 plus hour days with no sleep. So crossing all that stretch was pretty tough, and it was taking its toll. We got our biggest surprise as well when we got to the last town in Kazakhstan. We created quite a storm, and we'd had a police escort for some of the stretch in Kazakhstan. And some of the Mongol Rally teams were on the Facebook group going, like, anybody watch out, the police, Kazakhstan, you know, they're all pulling us over saying we've been speeding and trying to get a fine. It's like, how are you all getting on? And we're like, yeah, we're getting on okay. No, we're fine, yeah, we're fine. Don't know why, but because we've got blue flashing lights in front of us, kind of helping us along the way. And it was great. So, but when we got to the last town, they held a big fanfare. And what they said was, we've got a big traditional Kazakhstan greeting for you when you get there. I was like, okay, so we had the local girls who were playing drummer and they were singing, which was all wonderful. And then this guy comes up and goes, we also have milk and bull sacks. And my wife just looked at me and went, I'm up for trying anything. And I've done anything, I've tried everything on this rally, but I'm not sure I'm up for bull sacks. And I was like, okay, we don't want to offend. And then we were quite lucky because when they gave us the camel's milk, we had a drink of the camel's milk, and it is lovely, by the way. It is basically fizzy natural yogurt. That's what it tastes like, but it is apparently very nutritious and is very lovely. Ball sacks were little round bits of puff pastry. Not what we were thinking, because I was pretty horrified. I was just thinking that was going to be very big and it was not going to be very nice. So we enjoyed that, and then we went on to Russia. So Russia, when we hit Russia, because we've been, going 36 hours without any sleep, as soon as we hit Russia, we thought we were going into this really dodgy communist country. It's going to be really scary. We're going to go across the border. It's going to be really bad. We got to the border crossing, preparing for probably the scariest border crossing, the most stringent. The girl was amazing. It was a small border crossing, and the girl just went, oh, British passport. I've never seen one of these before. It's cool. Ushered us through. We saw a guy, we showed him our passport, they stamped it, and we walked away. That was it. We were in there for like 5 minutes. We thought it was just incredible. We thought like we were in Turkey, and it was like 5 hours crossing a border in Turkey. It was 5 minutes crossing a border in Russia. But as soon as we started to drive away, that's it. Our bodies shut down. If anybody's seen the video on social media, we posted a little video on social media, and literally we came down with the most horrendous flu. We were just run down completely. But we had 10 days to drive 1,500 miles, and we had no charging infrastructure organized here. This was literally back to just begging people for a charger, and we just had to keep pushing on. So it was pretty rough. But we decided to stop. There was a number of Nissan dealerships along the way, so we decided to stop at a Nissan dealerships along the way and see if we can charge there. They were really accommodating. One of them, when we got there, actually said, we'll arrive at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And they went, it's fine, just turn up. We've sorted out with security, and they'll show you where to charge, and they'll show you where you can sleep for the night. And I can say it's the first time I've ever slept in a Nissan dealer showroom. We got in and we had sleeping bags. We're sleeping on the leather sofas. He got coffee and croissants out for us and everything. And we were just sleeping in the dealership, and the cleaners are coming in at 5 o'clock in the morning, hoovering up around us. It's a bizarre experience. But then after leaving there, we got to this little small village. And this was probably our dodgiest time. Because we asked every cafe, every restaurant, everybody we could find about getting a charge, and everybody said no. So we're thinking this is the time when our rally could come to an end. We're about 500 miles from the finish. This is this is not very good. So I went onto Google Maps and I saw there was a fire station. And for words of this, we were using Google Translate in all these countries, because obviously none of us speak Turkish or Kazakhstan or Russian. So we used Google Translate, and it worked beautifully. And when we got there, we went to the fire station, and I just Google translated, you're used to saving people's lives. Is there any chance you can save mine just now and give me electricity? And the guy looked puzzled, and he walked away, spoke to his superior, and he came back and went, yeah, plug in. So we plugged in to a big fire hydrant, which had an electric plug on the side. We plugged into that. The guy's got a bowl of soup out, got the tea on the go, and we just sat for about 5 hours just chatting to these firemen in Russia. And it was phenomenal to hear about their perspective of the West and what we think about Russia. Is completely different to what actually goes on there. But then what they then did, which was really amazing, was they then phoned ahead to the next fire station to say, these guys are coming to your town, you've got to give them a charge. So, and then they phoned to the next one, and they phoned to the next one, and we just kept going. And we went and went to all these fire stations. And one of the last ones we went to, the guys were saying, we're going to unplug again, like Turkey, unplug, and we're going to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're just going to crack on. They were like, no, get your sleeping bags, you're sleeping in the bunkhouse with us. We were like, And we actually bumped into another Mongolia Rally team who were from Russia, and they were like, nobody gets to stay in fire stations. No public gets to go into the fire stations in Russia. If they do, this could mean these people's jobs. That's their lives at risk. And we're like, okay. And they went, we're staying with you. They came with us and slept in the bunkhouse. And the next morning we got to play on all the fire equipment and slide down the fireman's pole. So all these boyhood dreams. It was great. So I was loving it. We had all the respirator equipment on. It was great. And then we had about 150 miles to go. So we were driving, and it was getting to about 8 o'clock at night. So we knew we were going to have to stop somewhere and sleep before we got to the finishing line. And we got a call through a contact of ours. He said, the Russian state Russian state electricity company have said, do you need a charge? Because they're going to offer you somewhere to charge. We thought, okay, yeah, that's cool, we'll do that. So we drove down this track, and we got to this little small road, and there was a guy standing there in a full business suit and a big sign saying Mongolia Rally. Thought, that's our guy. So we'll turn over and we'll speak to him. And he just pointed down this dirt track and said, down here. It's like, okay. A Russian guy is pointing us into the forest. This can't go wrong, surely. So we drove down this dirt track, and we saw this little wooden hut. And we thought, okay, we're going to charge there. We'll get some sleep in the car. It's fine. We'll wake up and we'll go to the finishing line. Gave the charging cable to one of the electricians, who basically just proceeded to rip the end off the cable. He turned around and he walked up to the pylon. Some of you may have seen this picture online already, but they walked up to an electricity pylon, opened up the cover, and just wired the cable directly straight into the pylon. Don't recommend it, but what I would say is, at this point, we just didn't care. This could have obviously damaged the vehicle. We were 50 miles from the finishing line. This could have ended the rally, blew the charger, could have done anything to the car. But we just looked and went, yeah, okay, on you go. Plugged it in, we pulled the full 6.6 kilowatt. And it was great. So that charged really quickly. So what we did was we disconnected at like about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and we just headed off. And we finally made it to Anudi, which was great. So it was 8,500 miles. It took us 56 days. And it was just, like I say, constantly driving every single day. When we pulled up, there was a lot of looks of amazement and shock. Because what we didn't know was there was a lot of people running a book to see whether the electric car would actually finish the Mongolia Rally. And not a single person from the rally organising team actually betted that we would do it. So everybody kind of turned up going, and so we made it. We spent in total 100 euros on electricity. Bearing in mind, we drove back as well. And that includes that cost. What I would say is Austria, do you know, is really expensive for EV charging for some bizarre reason. We spent 50 euros of that in Austria. So it's insane to think. I don't know why they charge so much, but 100 euros, you know, the benefits there for when you're speaking to people about electric cars. It's like you can drive to Siberia and back, cost you 100 pounds in electricity. So it was great. But what we've obviously coming back and learning now is electric vehicles are getting bigger. The ranges are getting bigger. So that's not really a big deal anymore. Driving to Siberia is actually not a big deal. If you can drive 300 miles, that's a day's worth of driving. But we're still proud of doing it. And we will be doing some more adventures. We can't disclose what they are at the moment because we're still working on them. But you know, I hope the whole idea with that was also to inspire people in the room. So hopefully people in this room, I know some people already do, but will be more encouraged to go out and do longer journeys in electric cars. And if you do, and if you're thinking about it and you're a little bit worried, go onto our website, go onto my Twitter, whatever, get in contact. I'm happy to give as much advice and support, help you plan a route. Just get in contact, because the more and more of us that do it, the more and more you'll find it's actually good fun. But yeah, so that was the Mongolia Rally. Hope you kind of enjoyed it. I could talk all day. We had 111 charges. There's 111 different stories to tell. So I could be here all day, but I won't. So, because I believe we're going to see Biff as well.